So pretty much, some people call me Rigo. Uh, Rigo Ortiz. And yeah, I guess I am an artist. Sometimes it's kind of difficult to really, say that I am, just because I do have a full-time job. I did study graphic design. So sometimes we're like, oh, what do you do? Or try to compare myself to other artists who really, grind hard on it. It's like, should I say it? Should I not? Should I, how do I introduce myself in that way? But I guess the more I do it, I guess it becomes more solidified that I am an artist. It's what I do. But
That's tight. How long have you been making art for?
I want to say, just growing up in school, I've always taken like art classes, and I've always drawn, doodled and whatnot. But I guess like at a professional level, honestly, like maybe like the past 10 years, I really like to like, all right, let's go, let's see what we're gonna do, and basically just like solidify it, like brand it out, trying to bring some of that graphic design knowledge I have to really like polish it, and really like start with it, Um, so yeah, about 10 years now.
Gotcha. That's exciting though. Would you say that growing up, right, since you have been doing art almost your whole life, would you say that there was a lot of inspiration in your household growing up?
Um, Probably not in the household. Not My parents aren't necessarily creative, but I'm fortunate that they're in favor of like whatever path I take, and they're really supportive. Um, so mostly like growing up with the media I consumed as a kid more so than the household. But like I said, just the support itself really helps. Uh, Grow that, because I know a lot of people are like, oh, art. It's like it's one of those things like, is that a career? Is it a hobby? So when you have like supportive parents or supportive people in your life that are like solidify that, I think it really enhances, the art, or it's pretty much your creative wants, from like becoming just like, oh, I'm not really, sure if this is what I want to do, and you don't really necessarily pursue it as much as you would want to. It's because it's like there's like some negativity or not a lot of support, opposed to somebody who really supports you on it, and then you just go full blown and you just go at it.
Yeah, I mean that's the most important thing, right, about art is being able to create from a space of just the sake of creating, right? To being creative, like not trying to focus on anything else other than what you're making at hand. And when you have the platform to do that freely, right, where you're not struggling or you're not being like looked at in a certain way or you're not being forced to do something else, it really gives you the time and the opportunity to just really refine your passion, right, and what you're working on. And so that's important. So when did you decide that you're like, okay, I really love this enough that I want to make it my entire profession?
Pretty much like right after high school, I think. Just for the fact of like, like, well, I have to find a job. So I was like, well, I was debating really what I wanted to do, because I mean, from high school, you kind of like get an idea of like, oh, let's go to art school, like actual art school. But for me, it was like a little bit of that, and I had already messed around with different things in high school, including like programming and web design, which ultimately, transitioned me into like the digital, or like how it looks. And I was a little bit more like focused on that, or like, man, this, programming is fun. It's very it's a nuisance sometimes. But I started like transitioning over like, kind of how like this looks or that looks in this program itself, less so what the program did. And from there, I was like really thinking about it, because I'm very like, I tend to plan everything I do for the most part. So I'm always like, okay, if I pick this kind of like somewhat of the outcome. And I really wanted to just focus on something that I would enjoy, but also something I could live off. So that was kind of like, well, graphic design is kind of like in the middle of that. Everything's going digital nowadays. So you have to, think about things like that, to support yourself, but also things you love. And from there, I would do art on the side, um, but with the backup of having an actual job and the support in that sense. Um, so yeah, a little bit. Like I said, I'm kind of like a hybrid, but like so I'm always trying to think of, 2 steps ahead. Like this is not working, let's pivot, but also try and include what I want to do.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense, right? It kind of goes back to what we were saying about just like support, right? If you have that financial support to be able to pursue your passion, like that goes a long way as well. And then you're not also like struggling to like make the bills or things like that. Like that all stifles creativity, in my opinion.
It's a little bit of both. I've met a lot of artists. It's like they're in the same situation. They have like part-time jobs and then they do art, and then people who like just like let's go for it. And like we're not having this, like art is the job, and there is a little bit of struggle. I feel like it could go both ways. You could be relaxed about it, do art on the side, and progressively get better. Or you can just like throw something on the wall and see what happens. Be stressed about it. Be like being a weird vibe of like, well, I gotta make this and it better be good, otherwise I can't pay rent next month. Both instances I think are fine. S- some of it's like chaotic and something's like zane. But I think it really depends on the person and the art. It can enhance it. It can maybe not enhance it. Like I said, sometimes like if you have a full-time job or just a different job, like sometimes you do get lazy, and like sometimes it can hinder it. Sometimes you just need that push where like, well, I have to make rent, so you're forced to create art. Could be good, could be bad. I think there's like a lot of different approaches to art, and a lot of different outcomes for sure. You just have to try them, and see what happens.
That's fair. I mean, whichever one works best to like your skill set and how you like to kind of like perform, whether it's under pressure or under peace, right? And go from there. Because no, I think you're right. I mean, I think people can create a lot of incredible things like when they're under the gun and they have to get stuff out. I guess it's just more so personally for me. I think it's like the more stress free the situation is, like the more pure your art can be, and you're not having to worry about like I'm doing this because I want to get this outcome. You're more so like I'm doing this because this is what I see in my head, or this is what I want to bring to life, or whatever the case may be. So it doesn't like tarnish it. But yeah, no, I think that's a good point. It's like it can go either way. It's both sides of the coin at any given point. Which place do you like creating from?
Um, I was like kind of a little bit of both. I'll be honest. Like sometimes like I won't do anything until like it's kind of like the last minute. But I sometimes I enjoy that. It's like the rush, not necessarily the rush, but I guess just like knowing that I really need to do this within this time span. And I believe sometimes like even like crunch time can spark like ideas you personally wouldn't think of creating if you had more time to make them. And sometimes you just blow over and like it's like shit hits a fan and it's like, well, I didn't really finish this one, and there's been for the most part pretty good at it. I believe there's like maybe like one or two, or like I was trying to finish projects and it just didn't happen. I got too close to the sun, and thinking of, okay, I'm for sure gonna finish it. And I'm a person who like I will not sleep at all until it's completely done. Um, but I like experimenting that way, like having 2 months to do a piece, and like, oh, let's try to do this piece in a week, after work, and see what that creates, because it can create something good, it creates something bad, but I like to experiment, because if you stay in a lane for too long, I'm a person who tends to get bored. So I like to like, all right, let's do this now and do that. And my work really reflects that, from creating a type of medium, or type of art, and then like, okay, I've been doing this for a little bit. Let's dabble in some other type of like medium using my arts and my concepts and my ideas, and see how that transitions over to that. If it's doable, for the most part, you have to learn from scratch, which kind of sucks. I'm a person who like I wish it was just done. But unfortunately, and from there, like, oh, well, it's not really, transition well to what my art means, because you can't really place your art on everything, So like, oh, let's put it on t-shirts, let's put it on stickers, let's put it on literally everything, It doesn't necessarily always work that way. Sometimes you can. It really just depends on the art. and kind of like the message you're trying to incorporate with that. Um, Otherwise, it just becomes watered down, in my opinion. But
I mean, that's fair. I think. I mean, I always use this example. Like, I love their work, but the Keith Haring Foundation puts Keith's work on almost everything, right? Like across the board. And I think it is still successful to keep right his like design aesthetic alive and everything. But I think there is a sense of like, oh, here's another thing, here's another thing, here's another thing. So again, it's like that same conversation. It goes both ways.
yeah, his work is very flexible, a lot of pattern use and stuff like that, so it really works well. But yeah, the whole like it's everywhere. It can like slowly make it seem like it's not a value, just because it is on everything. You know, it's like a collaboration with like literally everyone at this point. Um, and I do like that they do collabs with different companies and different people, because his work is it's awesome work, and it should be, you know, viewed by everybody. Um, but there should be like a limit to, you know, we're not just doing this because, you know.
Well, I think they have a real good reason behind it. Most of the stuff goes to like donations, and they donate their charity. So it's like, I mean, part of his like reason for creating was to bring it to as many people as possible. You know what I'm saying? So it fits his like style as an artist already. It's just a good example of like how it's just like put on everything. Okay, so how would you describe your artistic style, right? And how did you find your way to that style?
So I pretty much categorize my art within like pop contemporary. So think of like Cause, you know, and Buff Monster. So very like playful, very like minimal, simplistic type characters. Um, in, you know, fun colors. I love color, so I use a lot of like different colors. You know, very vivid. It really actually also it's defined by the subject matter, which I'll pick. You know, so I only usually only do up to 3 colors per piece. It's usually like a base color, um, a contrast color, and then a dark hue of the contrast color. And that's basically depending on the subject matter will depend on the color picked. So sometimes it can be something, you know, super colorful, and then other times it's like something very gloomy. Then it's be like blacks and grays and, you know, very like muted things. Um, but yeah, like that's kind of like the vibe of it. It is also within like the category of lowbrow, which by, you know, today's standards, like it's a whole category. There's so many categories in lowbrow, um, but just at least somewhat anchor it so people kind of know what, you know, what I mean. But I mean, most people don't know what art is, so it's like you have to show them visually, especially people who don't know what art is, which is always fun to see like what they think like on first expression. Yeah, you know, like, oh, you know, you tell me you're an artist, and, you know, like, oh, well, let me see your art, and you know, from there, like, you know, either they smile or they don't, you know. Um, but I think it's really fun, and I've always been drawn to minimal contemporary, like it's. So I started off screen printing. So with screen printing, there's only like so many colors you can do. Obviously, you can do a lot. But for my instance, my characters are usually drawn. They're drawn out first as sketches, redrawn again in a program called Illustrator, digitally, and then from there I kind of like gauge, you know, like, okay, we'll do this with this character. Are we gonna print it? Are we gonna screen print it? And that was kind of like the base for me. So like for everything I did, it was like, well, it's gonna be solids. You know, it's gonna be only up to 3 colors because I don't want to screen print anything more than like 5 colors, or, you know. So it was kind of like that was kind of the process in how like I create things now. Those limiting factors in the beginning. I mean, I can definitely, you know, do anything now because I mostly do digital prints and stuff. So I don't really have to like minimize like how many colors I use. But I think it's been like I think I've been doing so long now. It's kind of like part of the brand. And the more, you know, I do it, like the more it makes sense to me. So I'm kind of like, you know, forming it. I was like, should I add a fourth color? I don't know. That's crazy. You know, I haven't done that in like a long time. So I like always like, no, let's go back to the brand. You know, because it is important to be you have to you repeat, repeat. So people are like, oh, I've seen that over there. Like, oh, wait, are you Rigo? From oh, I have a piece, or I've seen your piece at this place, and so forth. Because repetition is important in art for sure, uh, especially once you're already in it for like a bit. And in the beginning phases, it's okay to like do a little bit of everything and see what you like and what's working and whatnot. But moving forward, you want to really solidify that and do a lot of repetition with your work, as far as like showing the same concepts or similar things, similar colors, characters, repeating characters over and over until people like start remembering or like, oh, okay, because it's kind of like nowadays where the world is filled with art. There's like extreme amounts of competition. I believe like with the eruption of like the internet, it's like you'll see like maybe like 100 other people that do literally the same thing you do, and it's like, well, you have to beat them uh, at the same thing. So you want to be like quick with it, and you want to like be there before anybody else, because unfortunately that's kind of like what it is nowadays. It's like it's just a race at this point. The more people know about you, the bigger you are, the more like what you're doing solidifies it as like your own. Even though like there'd be 100 other people that do more or less similar characters or color schemes and stuff like that. It's like, wait, aren't you that other artist? It's like, I know, kind of similar, but so you kind of have to beat them with that. Um, so I feel like it also depends on the genre you pick, because there's like so every genre of art there's competition. Unless you make something revolutionary and something new, something nobody's seen before, that would be kind of cool. But you're only inspired by what you see, and sometimes it's difficult, to really create something new. So you just have to not necessarily make something new or crazy. You just have to be the best at it.
Interesting. Okay. That's interesting that you view it more like, I guess I don't want to say a competition, but in a very competitive nature, right? Like, have you been compared to like other artists where they're like, oh man, your work kind of reminds me of fill in the blank?
Yeah, I mean there are other artists, or like as far as like using similar like oh, you use ice cream here, it's like, oh, you're like that other ice cream guy. It's like, so if you use repeated like familiar items, or like let's say food, or very things that are like very repeated through a lot of artists, because they use food too, or that's how people think. They see pizza over here on this artist, they see pizza over there on this other artist, like, oh, you're like the other guy who does pizza. Yeah. So it's like, all right, cool. It's fine. I don't take it in a bad way. I mean, like I'm aware of the competition of other artists doing similar things. You can only do so many new things, without repeating stuff. I know a lot of people do like little speech bubbles and stuff like that, which is, I mean, you'll see it on that artist, you'll see it in this. Not necessarily like copying or anything like that, but it's a common thing. Like there's only so many things you can do unless you do something extremely niche nobody's doing. Um, but then it's like maybe it's too niche and like nobody can really relate to it. So there's like a little bit of that too.
How important is making your art relatable?
I think it should at least engage the viewer in some aspect, where they can be like, oh, I get it because that, and that's in my life. Because if you go too far, people don't understand the concept. Not necessarily in pop contemporary, but like let's say abstract. Because some genres of art are like so like open to the imagination. There's like open ended things. They can mean anything. And sometimes like even I've gotten on my art where like there are like current like little details that I do, and like I've had somebody like, oh, what's up with the threes? I'm like, what do you mean the threes? So for my characters, I do a lot of mammals, so they're kind of like fuzzy. I tend to do like, I guess like a three, uh, design to convey like furry. and I had a person who was like looking at threes, and I couldn't understand what he was talking about. And then I'm like, yeah, and then he like goes like three. I'm like, I didn't see that, but you know, it doesn't mean anything. But it's just weird how people interpret it, and like certain things, like they don't even like think about like the piece as a whole. They start dissecting like every little thing, like why don't you use any pupils? Because you know, or like why is this ear like this, or like why is it like, you know? Because sometimes like I'll do characters and not necessarily to reference like the actual animal. You know, they'll be stylized and whatnot. But then like, why do you make their eyes so tiny, or you know, or like why are their mouths so like, you know, evil teeth and like that, and like that's kind of like interesting. But also like you kind of like they cannot relate to it because they've, you know, had those experiences or seen similar things. Because if you do something and they don't understand it, not necessarily a bad thing, but you want the person to kind of somewhat, you know, relate to the piece in some manner. You know, even if it's like, I like the colors, you know, that's fine, that's cool, you know. But
I mean, that's a start to conversation, right? Like, I think even just like the person asking about the threes, like that's good that somebody's actually looking at your work and trying to, you know, find a deeper meaning in what's being created. And even then, like that can maybe inspire something in you to be like, okay, well, if that's kind of how people are seeing it, maybe I do want to sneak in like a certain pattern that's like, you know, very specific to me, right? As you work on establishing that motif, right? How can you create more separation from yourself and other artists? Like I know, shout out to the homie Eric, he does his E inside his artwork, like it's very tucked in the details of things. So it's like, yeah, it's a typical thing that people will do, right? Is like they'll manipulate certain numbers or letters to fit within the constructs of the art that they're working on. And it's, again, it's a nice way to establish your motif and just continue to push that repetition like you were talking about, because it is super important for people to be able to like see a piece and recognize it, right? Like for example, you know, we were out last night and I saw Matt's piece through a window and I was like, oh shit, that's Matt's piece. Shout out to the homie. So it's rad when that happens in instances like that. Have you ever had anybody kind of try to steal your style or your artwork?
weirdly enough, I did. Yeah, it was in school though. It was in school, and before like I, you know, established the style I'm working with now. But just the feeling of somebody like just bootlegging your design is kind of like, what? That's crazy, you know. But no, it was in school, and you know, in school I was like experimenting with like a lot of styles and different concepts and stuff. But I mean, like, set the internet sometimes it is a bad thing, you know. But yeah, I had like designed the character, finished it. There was this one website a long time ago during school that everybody would post to, and you know, people could see your designs and they'd be like kind of like Reddit. They would upvote it and whatnot and be viewed, which is cool because I did get some views from actual like clients I had worked with during college, which is like, that's crazy, you know. But yeah, this instance, because it's a big world but also a tiny world, you know. And there was this character I noticed instantaneously that it was literally my character. They, like, no joke, they had done like their own like style of character, but they kind of like referenced one of my characters and like verbatim just like copied the whole, like, it was a character like just leaning with like a sock and a shoe, like exact, just in their style. And like, I mean, I knew it was mine because I drew it, you know. And had actually contacted them through I don't remember what it was. It was through Adobe Behance. That was the platform. Yeah. So it was on there. I'm like, dang, that's crazy. So I contacted like, hey, you're like ripping off my like literal, you know. It can be a reference, but that's like an exact reference. Yeah. You know, like the position and everything. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry. Eventually they like changed it up and stuff, but
That's crazy though. At least you were able to reach out to them and be like, "Yo, what are you doing? Just like bootlegging my work," and that they were at least responsive enough to apologize and not just be like, "Sorry, dog, this is mine now."
yeah, it's crazy, dude. Because I mean, like, artists nowadays, they just get all their stuff ripped off by large companies. It's insane. They're just like, kick rocks. I don't know what to tell you. You know?
Well, it's messed up. Like you work so hard, and then you see, like, I mean, you see it a lot. I know it comes up on my feed, like people talking about like, "Oh, this is my design, and it's for sale at like Hobby Lobby or something, or like a Target shirt or some stuff like that," and it's crazy. But it's not the corporations, it's the person that's working for the corporation who's just taking shortcuts, and they're like, oh, this looks good, nobody's ever going to know that and that's where the problem starts. But
Us with our 100 million users, nobody's gonna recognize that, once we post it up.
yeah, but it's cool that you called him out and that he made the adjustments. I think that's important. I think that was important for that person to be like, I can't be just stealing people's stuff. And it was good for you to just be able to like defend yourself and be like, yo, what are you doing? So no, that's interesting. I'm glad. Well, I hate that it happened, but I'm glad that you took action against it.
No, I think it was a good, like, not necessarily like a lesson, but like a good uh example, or I guess a good like life lesson. Like, okay, maybe I shouldn't like post literally everything. Because I mean, most artists tend to do like, they'll do on canvas or something. When it comes to like digital, it's much easier to like rip off, especially if you have post the whole thing on your Instagram or anything, opposed to like just trying to reference it back, because anybody can literally just copy paste an image, and they can just literally just change the colors or do whatever they want with it at that point. So I've been more like keen on like not posting literally everything, more so like maybe like reference photos of like in progress or kind of like finished. More of my stuff nowadays is more like sculptural work, so it's kind of like less likely to be ripped off. Like I doubt anybody's wanting to recreate this whole wooden sculpture just to like bootleg it. So it's like the fear is like less. But for like prints and stuff, that's still a thing. But I also like looks at I just take like, all right, let's not post a super high res image of this, so anybody can just literally just copy and print it out and not pay for it.
Yeah, don't make it easy for them.
Yeah.
What are you currently working on today? Like, is there a project that you're working on right now? Is there a new design? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so pretty much I recently renovated my studio, because I have this solo show in February, here at 1301, yeah. So I've been prepping for the last couple of months, just like mentally, and like, all right, like, how are we gonna do this? But also, I'm a very like conceptual thinker, less so like drawing out stuff and like putting it all out. More so like it's in my brain, and it's already done in my brain, so I kind of like already have like the layout in my head of all the pieces I need to make. So right now, yeah, we have 2 months away. So it's gonna be a deep process. What I tend to do every time I do any show, I want to create something new. So I'm always like brainstorming new ideas. Like, all right, did that last time? What can we do this time? But for the most part, it's been a lot of sculptural pieces. I tend to do mostly like multi-layer woodcuts. I've been doing those for like a bit now, and it's just something different. When you come from like digital, sometimes it's difficult to literally just like do something digital, print it out and frame it, because there's nothing wrong with it. It's just like sometimes it doesn't stand out against like, oh, you see like this canvas and like you see paint strokes and they're like, damn. Opposed to like a really flat image. So I was like, well, let's try some new things. And I've been dabbling with woodcut, and I've really enjoyed the process of it, the way it looks. So I've been doing a lot of that. I've been messing around with like LEDs and just incorporating those like faux neon signs, which a lot of people have like really liked. So a little bit of that stuff, really moving toward the sculptural aspect of it, doing like even more like actual like busts, more depth, more dimension, and seeing where that goes really.
What got you started with like wanting to work with the wood sculptures? Was it just a need for separation, or was it something that you have had an interest in and were like, now's the time?
A little bit of both. For sure, I was like trying to research how can I, go from this flat image to something more dimensional. I did dabble in painting. I hate painting. The process is not fun for me. Well, yeah. It's like you come from digital, everything's like on the fly. It's so quick. I can change the colors at a whim. You know, and the painting is not for me. Aside from like the starting off, painting, you're not gonna be amazing. You're not Picasso. So you have to practice. And I'm a very like really don't want to practice right now. I just want to be good. To be done. So I was really looking to like, okay, what's not necessarily like difficult, but still conveys what I kind of like want to do. So I really got into the aspect of like screen printing. From screen printing, I started doing like the woodcuts because they share somewhat similar characteristics in the making of it. So pretty much all the woodcuts are dissected from the digital piece, cut out, but I'm still doing like stenciling with spray cans, um, and that's kind of like the way I stencil and like cut out everything is like very similar to screen printing in some aspects of how to prep the art, and like what layers go before other layers, or just like layering in general, and like the process, like we'll have to paint the base first, let that get the stencils out, and then like go element by element and spray paint those one at a time. Um, but it still conveys the type of work I do, which is like very sharp, clean. So it really works out. If you're doing something like very textural or something, digitally, you would have to find a way how to like, trying to mimic that in that platform. Um, Not necessarily trying to take the easy route. It just happened to, yeah.
But that's cool though that it's more so not so much that you've deviated from what you do. It's more that you've like built on top of what you do, right? When you talk about like the screen printing and then how you turn everything into different layers and how you work. Because I mean, I've seen some of your files in Illustrator. Yeah, it's all layers. Like it's very layer driven. So that's awesome that you've been able to just continue to evolve that style and bring in new components rather than just like start from scratch every time. That's super exciting. Um, what does that show in February look like? What are you thinking so far?
For sure, a lot of sculptural work. I'm actually gonna start dabbing into doing three-dimensional, more so like closer to three-dimensional. The busts I have been doing are more so just like layered pieces, but not actual like they're not rounded off or like actual three-dimensional pieces. Uh, so I want to start doing that. I'm thinking of doing this very large scale bunny, and like the frame of it will be wooden, but then introducing like textile. So I'll be pretty much the exterior will be using I believe it's mink fabric, which is like a fuzzy fabric. So trying to use like materials in the textile world that would translate from like digital, like it makes sense to use fuzzy material because it's a bunny, and trying to figure that out. But I think that's kind of like the next thing for that, and I'm kind of excited. For sure, it's gonna be like very new to me. I'm gonna have to like figure out how to sew. Um, but I mean, I have friends who are down to help, and that's the cool thing. Like if you're learning something new, um, for the homies, they're just they're down to help out. Like, oh, I can, teach you a little bit about painting or how to do certain like things, and that kind of helps the process. Or trying to ease into wanting to like try this, because sometimes it is intimidating. Like, oh man, or like you don't have the tools or the resources, and you're like, well, I don't know if I want to go into this. It's like very, I have to like get this all sorted out, and like this equipment and the materials. Like, do I really just want to like let me how can I dabble into this? Um, so for sure it's gonna be like kind of chaotic at first, but I think I as long as you feel comfortable and like you can do this, I mean that's all you really need. Unless it comes out terrible, then.
So again, it's more of a continuous evolution of what you're doing. Because even just again thinking through like, okay, if I'm making these like soft characters in the digital format, like how does that translate into just like a more like 3D space, and what does that look like? What does that feel like without it being too foreign, right? You're not trying to create these bunnies made out of like silver, It would be tight.
In the future,
I don't know when you get there. Let me know. I'm here to see it. But it makes sense, like as you're going through just like this very organic process, like the steps that you're taking to get to where you're trying to get to.
And it's cool because I mean you're still utilizing your current processes in it, as far as like how to go about it. The structures can be wooden, so I mean I already have background in woodcuts and cutting out wood and assembling things like that. So you're just adding on top and seeing like, oh, okay, now this could be this. Maybe in the future we can add moving elements. I don't know. You just go step by step, but you're still utilizing the the processes and the skills you have, opposed to having to like restart from scratch because you're completely doing something completely new. Now you have like zero skill in, but
Well, you're just layering, right? Just that's the guy. He's layering stuff all across the board. I see it. I see you. That's awesome, man. That's exciting. So why the bunnies? Why the creatures? Why the animals?
um, a common question I always asked. Yeah. Um, uh, just growing up, in the 90s, all the cartoons, the characters were really distinct. Most of the times the characters are like mammals or cute things. Um, and I like cute things like that. So for the most part, I tend to do like mammals, or it's just like characters that have like a secondary layer to them, as far as like, oh, not only are they cute, but they're also like furry and fuzzy, and there's like hair and like certain elements to it, opposed to more so like human human figures or like stuff like that. I was never really into like drawing human aspect type things. It's just like, it's not for me. It's cool because like it's relatable, you know and I like to be relatable, but I also want to create something that is like not existent, and like with these characters I do, they're cute, they're fun, they're furry, but they wouldn't necessarily exist in the world, so I want to create something that is relatable, but something new. And for the most part, it's cute just because it's in high school. While I was messing around with like illustration, like what routes, what subject matter, you do have to take into consideration a little bit the market, as far as like if it's like a completely niche thing, like you're just doing, I don't know, you're just drawing tripods, and that's their subject matter. I don't know who's gonna want that in their living room or whatever. It's just like somebody who's really into tripods. So you really have to gauge a little bit what people like, but obviously not deviate too much where you're just pleasing people, you know. Because at the end of it, you want this to be, you know, uh, not necessarily a job, but you want to make some money off of it to live off and still enjoy, before you're like, it's like, oh, people like dogs, I'm just gonna do dogs. It's like, well, I don't really like doing dogs, so I'm not gonna just do it because people want it. But I also want to make sure I'm doing something that is obtainable to people. Like they get put in somewhere and like, okay, cool. So it's a little bit of that. The elements I use, the sizing of like, there are like current like brand things I do with like the characters. All the characters, the heads are usually circular, and then they go from there. The eyes are like a certain shape, certain size, and in comparison to like the ears and stuff. Because I've like in Japanese like illustration and stuff like that, they use like certain things to make things cuter by decreasing the size of the eyes and making things large, emphasizing certain things. And I always like cute things like that. And it's, like I said, it's relatable to people. They like that, but then also incorporate like the sharp teeth and the evil grins and stuff like that. So it's stuff I like incorporating and meshing into that as well. So it's not just like what the people want, you know.
I mean, that's a good approach, I think, to be able to mix the two, right? Like a little bit of that awareness as far as like how your artwork can be marketable and how it can sell and how people will buy it. But also, again, not losing yourself and only, like you said, being people pleasing, like making sure that you're creating something that you do like, which is the scary monster stuff. So no, I think that's a good blend. I mean, from what I've been hearing, it sounds like a lot of the decisions you make are really well thought out, more so than anything, right? Like, and understanding why it is that you're creating the way you're creating, I think is another thing that's been kind of stand out in talking to you, right? Like, it's not just, I don't know, I just wanted it to look cute. It's like, no, like I wanted it to look cute, and these are the things that we're doing to make it look cute. Like, we're working with proportion, we're working with scale, we're working with a lot of different elements that maybe the user might understand immediately, or not the user, the viewer might understand immediately, or they might not. But again, that still opens up the door for conversation. When somebody asks you about the piece, you can be like, yeah, here's all the, the context behind it, that you might not have immediately gravitated to. So no, that's exciting. So far this year, what has been your favorite project that you've been able to work on?
I want to say the first bust I made, which was for a show. My my memory is terrible, but it was this year for a group show, I believe. But it was the first time, just creating something more than just like flat on the wall. So it was an actual like close as possible to like a three-dimensional piece I could make. But it's more so like a giant three-dimensional bust woodcut. And from there is like exciting to see how it go. I'm going from like flat, kind of max. I usually do like 2 3 layers on my pieces, but now it's on the table, and now it's like big and dimensional and huge, and the scale I'm doing, it's like now it's like a thing in the world, opposed to not necessarily flat on the wall, but now it's like now people can really like go around it in a 360 type environment, and then like really see even more of the actual piece, like things you wouldn't necessarily see if it was just on the wall. You only see the front face of it. For sculptural things, you can like just go all around it and see new things, and like, oh, that's cool. So just breaking into that has really like opened it up for me. Like, okay, this is exciting, or like, and that's why I like create different things all the time. Like, this works, this doesn't work. But it opens it to like, okay, and like I'm excited again. Because there are like certain like like, okay, I've been creating this, I'm getting bored of it, let's try something new, or like you just stop for a little bit, and like then you just like lose focus of what you're doing. But that has really like pumped it up. I mean, this show is gonna be like also like creating that new using textile, that's new, and I'm excited for that. So I mean, eventually there's gonna be a peak, and then the downfall will come. But let's think about that later.
Well, hopefully there's no downfall. Hopefully you just continue to build on top of the skill sets that you've already created, right? Like, I mean, in the last 10 years, you've been able to cultivate so many different skill sets, and hopefully in the next 10 years, you'll be able to continue to do the same. And until, you're 6 feet under, you'll be able to do the same. So that's kind of the move, ideally, is like never stay too stagnant and never stay too just like stuck in one spot, right? It's just continue growing and pushing yourself. And I think that's what, like you said, it makes it fun and energizing and engaging. Because, yeah, it's very, if you're just doing the same thing all the time, and maybe not everybody feels this way, but I know like some people, if you're just doing the same thing all the time, it's very easy to just be like, do I really want to keep doing this? Should I keep doing this? Like, I'm bored, whatever the case may be. So I love that you're taking this approach to just not only push yourself to learn new skill sets, but it's also forcing you to push your artwork to another level, right? And making it even better and more approachable. Because again, like you said, you're able to tell more of a visual story when somebody can actually walk around your piece and see more of like the interesting tidbits of your character, as opposed to only getting like this profile view where, yeah, you're still getting something, but it's not all of your world, right? Not everything that exists in there. So that's super exciting that you're, again, thinking about it like that, like why you're doing the things. Again, just being very intentional about why you do stuff.
Yeah, I think it helps, especially in like my type of work, or like the genre, because sometimes artists will create things, and they just, I get another question I get asked a lot in regards to like my pieces, like what do they mean? It's like, well, it doesn't really mean anything per se, because I mean, whatever I create is an instance of myself. But I do tend to lean toward like, well, I can tell you like the process or how I make it, or what certain things mean to me. But for the most part, whatever I create is, off the cuff, and it gets put into the world. Not always meaning something. I don't think it necessarily needs to mean something. But if you learn, some background of the person who made it, that could be, something you could do. I just feel like sometimes people always like want to know, and like I just want to say nothing. Just be like, like, I don't know.
I mean, I feel that. I think, I don't know. I like to know if there's more behind the work, right? I think a good example is like abstract art, right? We'll look at that. Like, it can mean so many different things. And if like somebody's just out there, I don't know. Again, there's some things I see on the internet these days where it's like, how is that even art? Like somebody's hanging a bucket from the ceiling and they're just letting it go in circles and stuff like that. And it's like, ba. And I mean, that's art for them. That's their expression of what they're trying to create, but without any context as to why they're creating that. For me, I'm just like, not really for me. So no, I feel you and I hear you. I think sometimes it doesn't need to mean anything, but it is nice when you can add value through context. And even like you said, if it's through the process that you're adding value, or if it's in just like the colors that you're using that you're adding value, still finding opportunities to create value within the piece. I think that's important to true art. I think that has to come with that. And then there also has to be like a technical skill set that has to come with being a true artist. So there's like little things I feel like that have to come with it. But no, I think, I don't know. It's interesting in the world we live in today as far as art, like that banana that sold that was taped to the wall. Like,
I mean, like I said, it's open ended, but it's for a reason. Not you don't want everybody to be leaning toward the same concept for everything, because then it becomes boring. You know, you want the opinions of everybody and what they see, what they do. Because yeah, everybody's doing the same blue square, and it always means the same thing. It's a blue square. Like it just becomes boring. You know, and that's chaos. I think.
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say chaos, but I think it's boring. I'm with you right there on that boring level. Like, there's nothing interesting. There's nothing inspiring. There's nothing like maybe the first one was inspiring, like how bold this man just went with the blue square, right? But then after a while, it just kind of, I don't know, it gets exhausted. I think that's the word for it there. It's like it's just exhausted. It's exhausted. But no, I've loved to see just a continuous evolution. Like, I mean, I got that piece right there of yours, so I appreciate that. I picked that up a long time ago. Been a fan of your work. Been super stoked to just watch you continue to evolve and grow and push yourself and push me, to want to be better at the things that I'm doing. And so it's awesome, man. I'd love to see the growth. So, being in the field for so long, what are like a few things that you would share with new artists who are like, man, I'm really interested in jumping in and I'm not 100% sure what I want to do, and or whatever. They're maybe lost in their just starting point. What would you share with them?
So I do meet a lot of artists all the time, and sometimes they like to get feedback like that. For the most part, I tend to like ask them like what their end goal is, you know, like what do you want this to be for you? They usually explain what they want to do, and from there, I take a very like strategic type route as far as like, well, there's like several ways, sorry, to approach this. You know, like I'm just very set on like give me my sticky notes and let's put this down. Uh, but for the right reasons, you know, you want to create your work in a way that you can successfully do it without like the least amount of, in my opinion, stress. So I give them different routes, and from there, you know, you can pick or choose or think what you want to think. You know, it's like as far as like, you know, just take a a part-time job and do, you know, a half-time art. You know, try that. Get a full-time. You know, make sure you're good, and then do this on the side. Or you know, just go, you know, no job, full art, and you know, go from there. But I mean, you have to like really figure it out. As far as like, I would recommend having an idea of like what you want to do as far as like your art. Maybe do it for like a little bit, kind of get introduced to like different mediums and see what's working, what isn't. Opposed to like really just like I'm gonna quit my job and start art from nothing, because that's gonna be extremely stressful. You know, like I'd rather not do that. Um, but that's me. I mean, everybody works differently, and they're willing to like take that lunge and like, all right, we're just gonna like find ourselves. You know, like I said, it's my feedback, and that's what I tell them. And as far as like, well, those are my 2 cents. You know, you don't have to take everything to word and do as I say. But those are like ideas I would incorporate in my life. And I've incorporated some of those already, and you can take it as you will, as far as like, okay, it's working for him and whatnot, but for sure have something established in your mind of what you want to do. Starting from scratch and not knowing anything, uh, probably wouldn't be the greatest idea. Just because it's just you open so many different pathways at that point, and you kind of like at the end of it, the end goal is to like close all those pathways and have one pathway you're going to toward, and just enjoy life creating art. You know.
Well, that's good. I mean, I think not forcing, but deciding on like at least in the short term on like a vision and what that needs to be. It gets you in the habit of executing on that vision and bringing that vision to life. And then from there, it almost like empowers you also, because you're like, okay, I did that. I'm going to try this and maybe I'll be able to do that. And I'm going to try this and maybe I'll be able to do that. And then again, that's where then everything starts to compound and you start to build these skill sets. And then 10 years down the road, you're at a way different place than where you started, but you have all these skill sets that you can use. Okay, no, so what do you have coming up next year outside of just the solo show, right? I know that after 4 successful years of running your own art gallery, you've decided to close doors this year. What prompted the shift and the change? What's the reason?
For the people who don't know, I do ran a gallery in San Antonio, pretty much trying to showcase a variety of different artists in the same genre, lowbrow. And basically, I'd gone to space pre-pandemic, and essentially, it was just gonna be a studio space for myself. But because of the location and how they do things there at the complex, it was a great opportunity to pretty much showcase people at the same time as well. And I just, I love helping people out. I'm like, well, let's, start this thing. And I mean, that was fun. No regrets on that. But I do, as of this year, it's been, sadly, just doing more group shows and really doing more of my stuff. And I feel like in order to go to like the next stage of that, I already do so much. So as of next year, I just decided to, close doors and basically just really focus on my work. Because it's very difficult trying to, work full-time job, trying to do the art gallery on the side, and then do try and squeeze in your work or the artwork you're trying to establish for yourself in between those crevices. So I was just like, it's working, but I wish I could focus a little bit more on my stuff and keep it continuous. Because sometimes there are slumps, just like, well, there's not really a group show this month, or there's not a show to make something new in the next couple of months. Like, so I just wanted to, make sure I'm still continuing to do new things. Because unfortunately for myself, at least, like, when you stop, you kind of like forget what you're doing, So like I would always forget, not necessarily forget, but I'd be like, it takes a while to like rev the engine back on, like, all right, let's get in the momentum, It's like starting from just a cold start, and you're like, all right, let it rev for a little bit, get warm and whatnot, and yeah, it just be difficult sometimes, and like, fortunately, the only way to make that happen is to cut down, cut down on things that I was already currently doing. It was a hard decision as far as like, well, I can somewhat try and make it work, but the end, I just like, no, we really have to like cut it down. Otherwise, it's just gonna be the same thing I've been doing, for the last 2 years, trying to make it work, try to please people. It's like, no, like next year, it's just me, and we're just gonna focus on me.
That's cool though. I mean, I think you're still keeping the space, right? You're prioritizing some of the things that you need to be focusing your time on as you try to continue to grow as an artist. And that doesn't mean that you can't go back to that idea at a later time, right? Like that's the thing. It's like, yeah, maybe, this year you take a break, but then maybe next year, like, oh, I want to pick it back up again, or maybe in 2 years, whatever the case may be, right? Like it's not a definite end as long as you have a space.
Yeah, and I mean that's what I told people. Like, for now, as of 2025, for sure, like, we're gonna pause it. Let's see what happens. Pursuing my stuff full time, see what goes from there, and kind of just like play around with it and see like, all right, or maybe like, I can do some pop ups in between, cut some time. But that's how everything is. You have to, in order to figure out if it's gonna work or not, you have to do it. So that's kind of like the plan. But yeah, I mean, maybe in the future, yeah, we'll come back and like, dang, I'm getting that itch again to like curate a show and like, let's do something cool. But I'd be open to maybe like curating for other galleries or curating with friends or something, like just helping them out. For sure, I'd be down for that. Cause I'll miss it a little bit, but like I said, at the end of the day, you really want to just focus on you, cause you are the person maneuvering your own world. So
Well, I think that's important. I mean, like you said, it's like you can always come back to it. You can have pop-up shows in between if you want, if interested, right? Like there's a lot of room for you now to decide what you want to do with the space as you continue to work on just like your work. But it presents other opportunities that necessarily might not have been there before again, because like having everything scheduled out a year, 2 years in advance, those dates are pretty much hard blocked. So you can't have like this, just off the cusp kind of response on how you want to do things, right? Like, so that's going to be some nice flexibility, I think, so moving forward. And I think it's even great because again, like you're well cemented in the San Antonio community as an artist. You're starting to grow here in the Austin area, right? You've been showing a lot more over the last 2 years here in town. So it's like you're starting to really develop this network, so you can always lend your expertise or insights to another gallery or another friend or anybody who just needs some advice on how to do things and how to get things out the door, because you did a great job running the space. I had a good time hanging out and just seeing everything that was getting done, seeing all the different art that was being put up. You did a great job curating artists. And it's an undertaking, especially when you do it all by yourself, right?
yeah, I think that was also like one of the biggest issues. For the most part, I do tend to like take on like projects, by myself. And yeah, the gallery itself was just run by me. The curation, the setting up, just cataloging everything online the next day. That way, all right, it's online. Go check it out. So it could be difficult at times. Like, dang, I wish I had like assistant to help me with this or that. Or just had like a little bit more free time to like really pursue and make it better, which was also one of the things. Like, oh, it'd be cool to do like a cool quarterly magazine or something on newsprint for like the artists for the shows coming up. But then it's like, well, that's another project, and like that takes away from my stuff. So I really had to like really balance what I wanted to do, and like I said, for now, 2025, let's focus on me, and we'll see where that goes. But it's about balance, balance and trying to pursue what you want to do, because that's the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that in my soul, because it's a lot of things. And every time you give your attention here, something over here loses your attention, right? And again, I think going back to something that you said earlier, the most important thing is like, what do you want at the end of this, right? Like, what does that like final point look like? Because that's where you're trying to get to at the end of the day. And so if things aren't necessarily aligning in your day to day currently with where you're trying to get to at the end route, then yeah, you got to pivot, make some adjustments, and then move forward from there. So I think that's a smart way to go about it. Any last things you'd like to leave with our listeners? Any last words of advice? Any last insights?
Um, if anything, just keep doing what you're doing. If you're an artist, you're new to the scene or trying to validate your work. Always go to different events. Meet as many people as you can. Because at the end of it, you're gonna need that support system, from other artists, to just to bring you up, but also to like validate what you're doing, and like other people will like pretty much bend your path and like structure your path as you're structuring it yourself, because they'll give you advice, and that'll change your path a little bit, but feedback is like extremely important. You don't want to go you don't want to be narrow minded when it comes to like things like art and stuff like that, like as far as seeing like, oh, what I'm doing is great, it's amazing, like, no, you want to get feedback from people, because it could be not that great, or like it can even people can enhance what you're doing currently, like give you advice like, have you ever thought about doing this, and then like, dang, that's awesome, like, and start incorporating that and just creating something completely different based on feedback.